Welcome to RebelRebel, a podcast for creative rebels and entrepreneurs every Monday. Season 1, Episode 5. Today I've got Chris Popoff in the studio talking about everything from co-founding a cutting-edge nuclear energy company, Marvel vs. DC, social media, and his killer podcast, My First 7. You can check out his podcast at www.myfirst7.com. Follow him on social media. Instagram is CSPops, and Twitter is CSPopoff. And learn more about molten salt reactors with his company at www.terrestrialenergy.com. You can check the description for all the links. I'm your host, Michael Dean Dargy. Season 1, Episode 5, Going Nuclear on RebelRebel. We're at Kensington Studio. I've got Chris Popoff sitting here with me. And
hello.
Hey, we've got, you're the creative force behind My First 7 podcast.
Correct.
You're also like a crazy acquisition nut.
Yeah.
That's a thing in your life.
Yes, that's how I've learned to make my money, basically.
Great. And you also dabble in nuclear energy.
I do.
So this is going to be a great show.
As one can dabble in nuclear power, yes.
Right. Awesome. Well, I don't even know where to start. Let's start there.
Sure.
How did you get involved in nuclear power? Like, what's going on there?
Good question. So basically, at the time that this came on my radar, well, maybe I can back it up to how I started thinking about work and life. You know, I was like any other clueless kid in high school, didn't know what to do. There was no real expectation for me, like to follow any kind of footsteps from my parents or whatever.
Yeah.
And the one thing that was like kind of beaten to my head was just go to university.
Right.
And where, why, for what, who knows? You know, I had no idea what I was doing at the time. So I just kind of always assumed, I'll stick around in Calgary because it's cheap. Looking back on it, I might have done a little more research and figured out something differently, but it doesn't really matter. And maybe that's where I'll meddle in my own children's lives. I'll push them to go so I can live vicariously through them, even though they might want to do something different. Yeah. That's how parents do it, right? So
tell them to be a doctor.
Yeah. So one day, a recruiter from the university came to our high school and put on a presentation and was like, you know, engineering is like this great field. You can get into it. If you want to work on alternative energy, then mechanical engineering is for you. So I grew up with this real sort of resentment towards the oil and gas industry, being born and raised in Calgary.
Yeah, sure.
Because it was just everywhere.
Yep.
And my parents weren't in it, and I didn't understand it, and it seemed to be way too influential.
Yeah.
In our lives, and I didn't really feel accepted by it. Yeah. So I did not accept it in return.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You rebel. You are a rebel.
RebelRebel.
Damn.
Totally. Yeah. So, but never really understanding that at the time, I kind of knew that I didn't want to end up there.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do something a little more interesting. And I didn't really know what alternative energy was. At the time, there was this really cool company in town called Global Thermal Electric.
Yeah.
And they made hydrogen fuel cells. And it was a really neat little company. Yeah. And I thought that was an interesting sounding thing because I loved science.
Yeah.
But I had no idea what engineering was. Nobody in my family had done it. And when you go through the education, you find that a lot of people are there because their parents also did that. Right. So they're just kind of doing what their family does.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I'm a little bit more free than that, so I don't feel bound by that obligation of family inertia or whatever you want to call it. And so I thought, okay, mechanical engineering sounds interesting, can get into that. Sure enough, there's no jobs in anything other than oil and gas. So
go figure.
Yeah, and even at the time, at least we were fortunate enough to have jobs available at that time. Now it's not so bright for kids coming out of that program, and I feel their pain. Because I got into it and found that the work was really interesting. The technology was neat. I loved the machines. Yeah. I loved the idea of helping mankind access energy because it is so fundamental to the quality of life that we have or do not have. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot we take for granted in terms of even just the material our wall and our ceiling is made out of.
I just got back from the Philippines and wow, what a difference.
Humongous difference. Yeah, and if you're fortunate enough to travel and are bold enough or courageous enough to go outside of the kind of experiences that you're used to having for yourselves, you get to see how different lifestyles present themselves, right? How other people live sometimes. It is shocking how good we have it. How good life is. And you can start to understand how we can get complacent in our society, which I totally think we are. I think we've been without ambition for probably 60 years as a culture.
Interesting.
I think we're maybe starting to figure that out a little, but at any rate, I ended up working in the oil and gas industry. Really knew it was not for me culturally.
Are you a petroleum engineer?
I minored in petroleum engineering.
Okay.
My major was mechanical because what Renee was saying, and I was mostly just enamored with how pretty she was. I was like, I'll do anything you say, Renee. But yeah, she was a really cool person. I ended up working on the student councils and worked fairly close with her on a bunch of initiatives in the future, which was fun. But anyway, back to the story. You end up in oil sands, and basically a lot of people know about the oil sands or the tar sands up north. And these things are like, I don't know, the deposit is like a hockey puck in its natural state. It doesn't flow like liquid oil would float on top of water. Bitumen would perhaps sink because it's got such a high density to it, and you can't pump this stuff up to surface the same way that conventional oil and gas works. So the university, there was a professor there by the name of Butler. He worked out how to get this stuff actually flowing to surface without strip mining it and separating it with hot water and everything. How they did that was generating steam and pumping it down a well, warms everything up, and then you return all of it back. And that basically takes a lot of heat energy. You burn a lot of natural gas to generate the steam. And so when everybody's saying that the oil sands are so bad for the environment, that's why. Because your emission intensity, the amount of carbon that you have to emit in order to get that next barrel of production back to your plant to sell is huge.
Like almost diminished returns. Like
well, and that's just one lens to look at it. Like if you want to look at it from a carbon balance point of view, like everybody seems to agree, well, it's an issue anyway within our society. It's a cultural issue. But if you look at what is climate change and how does human driven climate change come into play, well, it comes from what we're emitting into our atmosphere. And if you look at it like a bank account, we've only got so many tons of carbon that we can put into the atmosphere total before things kind of get too out of control with the other natural systems, the other dampening systems on the planet. So you have to look at energy from a few different lenses I've found over my career as an engineer and working in energy, whether it be in oil and gas or nuclear. And I will get to this question, by the way. I have to I
like the story, and I like the path that you're taking this.
I try to. There's just certain things that I don't know. I like to cover assumptions. I guess I want to walk you along the journey. But anyway, the three lenses that I find that most people talk about energy, one, the most common is economics, right? How much does it cost to produce our oil? And it's a really common discussion in our news media. And the layperson's looking at this like, well, why can't we get more oil out of our province? It's too expensive to develop. What does that even mean? They talk about per barrel costs and op costs and all of these things that mean virtually nothing to the average person. And the other lens would be maybe the carbon balance lens. Like, are we using too much carbon to get to the energy that's just going to emit more carbon? And people have a problem with that if they're looking at it from either an environmental lens or they're just kind of anti-oil and gas for whatever reason, and there are many that you would be anti-oil and gas. And the third, my favorite lens, because I like to try to work as closely to truth and fundamentals as possible, would be energy balance. So how much energy does it take us to go and get, extract, bring it back, process, distribute, and then use that energy source? Right. So that's...
Does it become a null thing, or are you spending way too much energy to get energy?
So you can think about it like that is the fundamental thermodynamic currency of what our activities are.
Yeah.
And if as a society we're putting too much energy into how we're getting and utilizing our energy, that means there's less energy available for other things like food production or hospitals or building cities with processing materials to do that, and or totally convert our transportation fleet to electric vehicles. At some point it becomes untenable, and the way that we live gets challenged. And that to me is probably the bigger threat than climate change, because we've demonstrated as a species that we're not very good at working these sorts of problems out with each other without causing mass, death and destruction. I mean, just look at how tough it was to get 1 million refugees out of Syria and into Europe. I mean, we're still dealing with that. What happens if that kind of climate-based migration is 10 times that, is 100 times that?
Oh, yeah.
As coastal cities or island nations have to move entire populations, where are they going to go?
Yeah.
Who's going to accept them openly? We have to fundamentally shift how we adapt. Right. That's really the problem. We're not adaptable as individuals, and geopolitically as well. It levels up to entire societies.
Yeah.
Right. So we kind of have to ditch that idea in order for us to go with the flow of nature, whether we're influencing it or not. So when I was looking at how we were producing oil sands and was wondering how can we get around this black eye that our province has around being a dirty oil producer, which on some levels is true, but we are, at least as an industry and as a country with our regulations, working very hard to get better.
Sure.
And compared to other places, we're really the only ones doing this.
Yeah.
And we're shy about talking about that,
which is really tragic. Because we need better press and better PR out there to let people know what's happening.
But I think the problem with that is that the product of the oil industry, the businesses in the oil industry, is not the energy itself. It's a stock. It's a share that gets traded, and executive compensation is driven by the performance of that, especially in the short term.
Yeah.
And so you talk about things that help influence that and not necessarily what you're doing as an overall business for the long term.
Yeah, I've started hearing those, like some talking points are starting to surface about, things that are being done up north to, mitigate climate change and production and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's starting to bubble up to the surface. But
and even if we were good at it, what effect does that have on the market? Right, we were talking about branding and brand consistency and story. Well, if we have this great story, like Canadian Diamonds has this great story, we're non-conflict, we're so crisp and clean. Imagine that beautiful Canadian Arctic. This diamond is even more pure.
Yeah.
Because, man, that's such a pure environment. It must be the best diamond on earth.
Yeah.
Well, the consumer has the ability to choose that diamond. If you're filling your car with oil, you have literally no idea where that molecule came from. It could have come from Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, could have come from Anzac, like you don't. If you had that choice on a consumer level, maybe that would have an effect.
Wasn't Mohawk, you used to know exactly where because they had a blended.
Yeah, they had an ethanol blend. Yeah, that was produced locally for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think most people don't care about their energy that much.
That's weird. Maybe we just need to do some better education.
I think we just need to expand our consciousness as people to, show some gratitude to what we have, and then you'll start to understand how a lot of the choices you make subconsciously, almost automatically, are done so on the fact that certain infrastructure has been built up and decisions were made around that to make your life easier. Like, we don't think about how hard it would be to go fetch our own water and get rid of our own waste.
Yeah.
Right? We've kind of trusted that whoever worked out that system made the best choice for us.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with our energy delivery. And we're seeing consequences where maybe those weren't the best decisions to make. And the problem is now we're all trying to argue about what is the best way to do it, yet we're not really, as a culture, in deep enough understanding what the trade-offs around these decisions are to make an informed decision, and to at least have informed conversations. The conversations are more colored by what group identity do we see ourselves in.
Absolutely.
Right? And so it's like my side has to win rather than what are we doing here and what should we be doing here, regardless of that sort of identity camp that you're inside of.
Do you think that it's possible for society as a whole to train our populace to be critical thinking, to ask the right questions instead of react emotionally all the time, to perhaps seek a more scientific method? Do you think it's too late to start coaching that into people so that we can have worthwhile discussions?
That is a major problem. I think that our education system is definitely evolving. Or there's a lot of pressure, tectonic level force on that institution of how education works. And think about people like ourselves. Even you get out of school and then you get released into the wild, and there's no more next thing. Right? There's no path that's charted out for you, and that can be crippling or extremely overwhelming. Or it can be this totally freeing sensation. I'll be honest, I flip between those two things.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, like looking at the freedom of adult life and saying, oh my God, what am I doing next?
I can do
crushing
anything.
Anxiety, or I can do anything.
Yeah.
And then you walk down that path and you start to fail enough, and it pushes you into the other camp of, oh my God, what am I doing? What am I even good at? All that doubt. So I think a commitment to education over your lifetime is certainly part of the solution to that. And maybe there's, what's the other phrase? You have to be willing to kill your heroes. In a sense that, if someone you really admired said something that you thought was true, if you find out that it is no longer true, you need to be able to shift, I think. And so can we train our population up to do that? I think you can, through the way you show up every day with the people you show up with, and putting things like this out into the world. And we can try baking that into our educational systems and what we're doing in family, but I don't know. It has to come from within. You have to want to be able to adapt.
So, and I guess it's a matter of inspiring others to make sure that, like yourself, like listen to you talk about your view and how you come at this problem is very inspiring. It's like, holy crap, we can actually do that. Yeah, we can. We can think that way, and we can now shape a future that way. So I think getting a message like that out, the more you can get it out, the more impact it has in our population.
So I still haven't answered your first question.
I know.
I think we're like 20 minutes in. Or whatever.
So let me sort of bring it back because people go jump down the throat of dirty oil. I'm using dick fingers right now. And tar sands and stuff like that. And here you are wanting to fix it with nuclear energy, which most people would be like, you're insane.
Well, exactly, because you can't solve a problem by combining two unpopular things, right?
Or can you?
Or can you? I guess we'll find out. So here's the connection. I was sitting in a theater downtown. What is the name of that theater that's on 5th and 1st? The old Parker House was there.
Oh my goodness. I was just in there. The Grand. No.
The Grand?
No, it'll come to me.
But
Theater Junction.
Theater
Junction Grand. That's what it is.
Yeah. It's like a historic site.
Yeah, it's amazing. Beautiful building.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
it's a totally underappreciated little venue in our city. Like you go to a place like Chicago and you see these theaters that are like 150 years old.
Oh yeah,
and the lighting that went in there.
Well, they still have Teamsters like downstairs, like pulling the ropes and.
I'm not a theater person, but you walk in there and it's electric.
Yeah. Oh my God, yeah.
Like, and the thoughtfulness that's gone into crafting that. Yeah. I wish our city had more places like that, but it will be the result of people fighting to keep places like Junction Grand.
Yeah.
And it was a TEDx talk, TEDx YYC, and there's a fellow by the name of Kirk Sorensen that came and visited, and he was a NASA engineer, and he was tasked with figuring out how to power a moon base if NASA ever put like a manned base on the moon. So he's looking at it
like a laser base.
Who knows? Some kind of whatever they're going to do up there. It's America.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
They've got plans.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And so he was looking at it on the balance, and he's saying, well, we can't, there is no fossil fuels up there.
Right.
So, and sending that stuff up on a rocket would be insane. You'd never do that.
Right.
There's no wind because there's no atmosphere. Solar doesn't work because of the way the lunar cycle works, and is basically just not powerful enough. And so he said that really leaves you with nuclear fission. Like, that's one technology we have. And as he was piling through all the archives of all the different variations of nuclear power that are available, because one of the misconceptions that people have about nuclear power is that the plants that they see on The Simpsons, or the ones that melt down in Chernobyl or at Fukushima, whatever, that is nuclear power. But that's really just a machine that allows us to generate the heat out of the fuel and then capture the heat so we can make steam and spin a turbine to make electricity. They're a thermal electric plant. And back when this stuff was first invented, really, as a result of a very successful military program, that's the other problem, the other branding problem we have with this, is that there was actually a ton of really creative innovation going on because scientists saw the power available through the weapon. They're like, how can we use this to like flow that energy source into our society as a whole? Yeah. And there was a lot of variance in terms of how you'd be able to access that energy. And the fact is that the U.S. Navy was so successful in converting what they knew about nuclear power for weaponization, because it was already kind of the province of military control, like producing the fuel, processing it, purifying it, getting it to where it needs to go. It was all under the command of, the Department of Energy was essentially created to control nuclear weapons, and everything else has flowed forward from that ever since. And Admiral Rickover, who was running the Navy at the time, wanted his submarines to be nuclear powered. So they came up with a version that allowed that to happen, and he was so good at it and built up a big supply chain around supplying that it was just like crony capitalism.
Right.
Plus military industrial complex. Like, just take the most influential people and forces in our society at the time, and it embeds a solution. And all the other variations that were possible went away. One of the variations that Kirk found was a salt-based reactor that was designed for the Air Force. So what they would do was put uranium in a little vessel with a fluoride salt, and the fluoride is very reactive, and it liquefies the uranium. So you have this like mass where the uranium, as it's getting hotter, melts the salt, and the fluid and the fuel is one and the same.
Wow.
But what it allows you to do is carry a ton of energy in a very low weight. Because imagine trying to put a water-based nuclear reactor on a plane. It'd be way too heavy. Water is so heavy for what it does.
And what are the emissions like?
Emissions?
Like, is it clean?
Oh yeah. So the problem with nuclear waste, as most people would call it, is that Admiral Rickover's type of reactor, the one that they use in submarines, the fuel mechanism is actually like a really complicated machine. You take these little pellets and you jam them together in rods, and you run water across it, and that's how you're extracting the heat. But it's random where the little molecules inside that pellet will convert into plutonium, and then those little points get too hot, and it can cause failure in the cladding and all that kind of stuff. So what you have to do is you have to swap it out. But that would be like taking a log off a fireplace when just the outer edge is singed. Right. There is much more potential energy available to us.
And that's why the emulsified...
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and there's ways to chemically reprocess those fuels and everything. So nuclear waste is actually referred to as spent nuclear fuel. It is 98%, basically 98% potential energy for future use. Like, these nuclear waste stockpiles that exist in North America could power our society for a very long time if we switch to a different kind of machine, like a molten salt reactor that allowed us to mix it up more thoroughly and not worry about these random changes. Like, it's all available to us as heat.
Interesting.
Right? And it's also very, very hard to take the elements out that you would want to make a bomb.
Yeah.
So that was the other major decision at the time, because it was at the very beginning of the Cold War. The Americans needed the advantage over everybody else, especially the Russians. And so they needed the infrastructure to power their navy, build up their military warhead stocks, and all these sorts of things. And so that variation of machine ended up getting what was known as beached and given to civilians. And the scientists at the time disagreed that this was the right choice for civilian use. He's like, Alvin Weinberg was the guy that was kind of leading a lot of this research and was recommending that the light water reactors not be used for civilian use at scale. Like the plants that we have today, there's too many potential issues with it, and there's other things that are possible, like the molten salt reactor, the one that we're developing at Terrestrial Energy, so that it's considered like walk-away safe. You can't have the same kind of failures that we've seen globally that cause all the panic that we have around radiation. So I saw that, and I'm thinking, well, here we have in Canada, we're this potential energy powerhouse. We've got a ton of uranium in the Athabasca Basin, which for the most part is mined in northern Saskatchewan because it outcrops close to the surface there. But if you do the work and you map it all the way back, it goes deeper into Alberta as well. And there have been wells drilled around the Dragon Lake area that have picked up evidence of tremendous amounts of very thick, extremely pure, high energy uranium deposits downhole. So Alberta is sitting on potentially another huge energy resource that we haven't even touched. So
go Alberta.
Well, and Saskatchewan, right? Like here we are sitting on this abundance of potential. And we're in a societal climate right now where we need to transition into a different sort of energy solution. And we've got entrenched interest in extracting oil and gas. But when you look at, remember I was talking about energy budget? It's taking more and more energy for us to access the energy that we're selling. And so at some point that becomes just a bad idea. Like, you might be able to make the economics look good. But if the physics doesn't work, we shouldn't be doing it. We're not contributing to society any longer. But if so we have to kind of move towards energy fuel sources that are more and more energy dense, meaning that there's more energy available in a smaller amount of the fuel. This is kind of one of my biggest beefs around renewables, is that it's actually a move backwards on energy density. And we'd be setting up our society. Don't get me wrong, I'm kind of tech agnostic. My thing is use what works in the situation that it works in. Like Jeet Kune Do would tell you the same, right? Do the thing that works for the situation you're in. So solar and wind I especially like. Solar is much more niche. But the problem is those technologies take a lot of material and a lot of energy for the amount that it puts out.
There was a talk about that years ago, and I'm sure it's gotten better with the electric cars, that it, in order to actually get the energy back that it took to get the fuel cell, it would be like 200 years.
And we're starting to get to that point in our oil and gas production in Alberta, that the energy we're putting into that next barrel it's starting to get so high compared to, and the other fact is that the quality of the product is lower than a conventional barrel of oil. We have to add hydrogen to it basically to make it comparable, and so both of those factors are really against it. And the longer you produce something, I forget the name of it, but it's basically you in economics, when you're extracting something, you take the best thing first. Right? It's the crap that's left over, right? The oil and gas industry in Alberta is like barely 100 years old. The Leduc strike was 52, I think. Or 47. I can't, anyway, it was like 40s, 50s. Kind of around the same time nuclear power was being really kind of considered a big basket. And we're already literally scraping the stuff that's left on the surface in a big mine. Like, what does that tell you?
Yeah.
We're kind of moving towards a situation where there are signs that the end is kind of coming.
Right.
So what can we do to make it last or make it better? So one thing that you can do, yeah, you can be a little wasteful. It's not totally efficient. But if we were good at taking our uranium out of Western Canada and then putting it inside of a thing like a molten salt reactor to generate a tremendous amount of heat energy that we can use to make steam to extract our bitumen and just kind of manage the transition of our society, like move people from one industry into another and still supply energy products to the rest of the world and help them develop and get money back. Like, this is all good progressive exchange in my view, that's moving eventually towards something else. And so I think personally that one day that little bullet of heat, that salt and uranium mixture that's about the size of a deep hot tub that can be made in a factory, then shipped to site, it'd be like replacing a pipeline that's running 24/7 or a rail cars that's just shipping thousands of loads of coal up to site.
God.
All of that's replaced by one bullet that's swapped out every 7 years and essentially allows you to access industrial grade process heat with zero carbon emissions. And because it's that mixture style of fission fuel, you're using more of it. So the waste footprint from the nuclear side is coming down dramatically, like really dramatically. There's actually pathways where you can have online chemical reprocessing of these things. So the long-lived waste of this stuff can go to zero, in theory.
Wow.
Like, we're not there yet. And so the machine that we're designing at our company is only using off-the-shelf stuff. So we only talk about off-the-shelf kind of results.
Yeah.
But there's a pathway to zero long-lived waste in nuclear energy. And eventually, Michael, what I want for us to be able to do is strip carbon out of the atmosphere or out of the ocean, which you can do, or just take natural gas and basically blast it with that heat that we're generating from the nuclear reaction and synthesize our combustion fuels. Right? Wow. So you can burn it, and because you grab that carbon molecule out of the atmosphere to begin with to make the liquid fuel, it becomes a store of that nuclear energy, right? That's really, you're getting the external energy from that reaction, and you're recombining all these carbon molecules into a product that people are comfortable with and familiar using, that we have all this infrastructure already in place. Like, I don't have to make the decision about how am I going to get around today without killing the planet. Right. Because if you go to the furthest extreme of the environmentalist camp, every single thing you do every day, like, where did this coffee come from? How far away was it grown? You know, what clothes am I wearing? You can drive yourself insane trying to make these decisions. That's how much we rely on the decisions of other people, designers, especially, engineers, especially, financiers, sort of. But I'm saying, like, we could be making in a factory our oil and gas for use for getting around, and it be essentially zero carbon contribution to the atmosphere anymore, because we're accessing the primary source from the nuclear reaction, and it becomes like a chemical battery, so to speak. But nobody really knows about. They wouldn't have to think about it. They just keep going to the gas station, filling up as they always have. Yeah. But instead of extracting the base petroleum product from northern Alberta, having to add a bunch of hydrogen, get it down to a refinery in Washington, and then it gets piped down to a gas station in California where someone can drive around. Yeah. And all that impact all along the way, you can now have your plant close to LA grabbing carbon from the ocean using a nuclear reaction to recombine it essentially into a fuel that same marketplace is going to use. Like, think of how much that dramatically shrinks the impact downstream.
That's amazing. It's staggering to think, actually.
Yeah. And
so how far away are we?
Well, in terms of our company in specifics, like this, a molten salt reactor is one of 6 variants that was grouped into a generation. It's called Generation 4 technologies. What we're using today is Generation 3 or Gen 3 Plus. 3 Plus would be something that's just slightly more safe, but still basically the same. So NuScale is a company that is owned by the engineering company Fluor, and they've co-developed essentially a way to miniaturize that conventional light water reactor and basically make it so that you can put it on the bed of a truck, get it to site, and they'll eventually put like 16 of these reactors to get up to gigawatt scale, which is what most power producers and utility companies are used to getting out of a nuclear option. And although that doesn't necessarily have to be the case.
Yeah.
And so I guess I kind of skipped over one distinction, is that nuclear in the past, what we're used to seeing today, it only supplies electricity. What we're talking about, what I described to you there about using it to generate steam, is what's known as process heat. We can do that because our reactor runs much hotter, but at an atmospheric pressure. So there's no big containment facility that you have to build to contain a possible steam leak or things like that. It changes the entire paradigm in terms of what it's offering and how you need to protect against potential bad case scenarios, right?
Right. Yeah.
Lots of coolant or whatever. So it's one of 6, and when they originally mapped this pathway out, the scientists figured that Gen 4 would be getting introduced 2030s, but more likely 2050s, if it ever needed to get there.
Yeah.
But with all of this that we're observing with climate change and all the shifting politics around it, a lot of that conversation is being accelerated. Canada is regulated by the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. So any design that gets built in Canada has to go through that approval process. Yeah. And it's actually open to approving licenses for things other than light water reactors. Oh. Whereas the United States NRC is set up to regulate only light water based reactors. So if you're trying to innovate down in the States, it's exceptionally hard. Oh. And think about that. If you're trying to be an innovator in that space, you're essentially choosing to take on all of that influence of the military, right? All of that supply chain that's now not only like, was it powerful back in the day when it first got going, but now you've got 70 years of inertia on top of it. Like, how are you going to get around that? Yeah. You know, and there's a lot of good work being done for the US to catch up, but they are quite behind in terms of the regulator. Man. Despite that, there is a number of entrepreneurial outfits out of the United States that are going through the NRC's process and trying to lobby them to change so that they can get their tech out of the US. Yeah. But what's interesting is that China's really taken to this as well, because they're ambitious. You want to talk about a society with ambition? Yeah. Look up the One Belt One Road program that they've got right now.
I'm writing down notes.
Which is essentially trying to modernize the vision for the old myth of the Silk Road trade route from China into Europe. Mm-hmm. There kind of was a Silk Road, but it wasn't like one road. It was a very complex network of multiple cultures contributing to the flow of goods back and forth. Yeah. But it's this like beautiful history of the Asian continent, right? And like super Asian continent, all the way from Asia proper to Europe. Yeah. It's all kind of one landmass, right? But what China's doing, if you're watching them globally, is that they're going in and they're buying things like the port in Athens and modernizing it, because the Greek government, Greek companies have no money. They're totally bankrupt. They're in pure austerity. But the Chinese are like, this is one of the most important ports in mankind's history and continues to be today. Let's get in there. Let's modernize it. Let's help the people in that area do more with what they've got. Yeah. And they're winning the hearts and minds of a lot of places like that around the world, especially in Africa and Asia. Mm-hmm. And what they're trying to do is get the wealth that's built up along China's coast, manufacturing everything. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's insane. There's cities that are 20 million people large that you've never heard of.
Holy.
You know, and there's dozens of them like this. It's insane, but they're mostly along the coast, and they're trying to bring that wealth inwards. They're trying to expand the middle class. And a lot of people are quite uncomfortable with the idea that a communist country is doing this and succeeding at really a capitalist outcome, but they are.
Well, we were just down in, I said we were in Philippines. We spent 10 days in Boracay, which is a little island just south of Manila. And it's getting shut down because it's got a terrible infrastructure. It's overpopulated.
Wow.
Duarte called it a cesspool. But what we found out...
He says that about a lot of people, though, or a lot of things.
What we found out, I was doing some scuba diving there, and I was talking with the diver, the dive master. And apparently... the reason why it's getting shut down is because China bought it. They bought the island and are basically turning it into a casino.
Of Boracay?
Boracay.
Boracay
is the island. And they bought it. And it's turning... basically, they're building infrastructure. They're dealing with the waste management. They're going to put in roads that are actually roads, not... I mean, you should see that it was so terrible getting from the port to our hotel. I was shocked. It's in desperate need, but now it's bought by Chinese interests to turn into a casino island. Basically.
Cool. Like, what's the other one? Macau?
I think so.
Yeah, when we were doing work with CNPC at Athabasca, and the guys that came over from PetroChina were a really interesting bunch because they were like, if you had any kind of ranking in PetroChina, you also had to be high up in the Communist Party.
Oh.
But these guys were educated at the best schools in the world, like London, Harvard, all kinds of really top tier schools, could speak multiple languages. They get put on posts in whatever country that they're developing. And I'm like, these guys are like James Bonds.
Totally.
Yeah. Really, really fascinating. And that's kind of their, I don't know what you would call it, an emissary sort of.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it was interesting, but those guys would brag about how awesome Macau was. It's like, if we keep doing business, we'll get there one day. We'll go hang out. We'll go have fun. So it sounds interesting. They're building another one. But all of this is tied to the ambition. The only way they can get this done is by accessing more and more and more energy.
Right.
And so China is like all of the above. They're doing absolutely everything. They're building coal. They're building gas. They're building oil plants. Yeah. They're building a ton of nuclear around the world, and they're also investing in ambitiously trying to drive advanced reactors, and this is what Gen 4 is called. So
is this like Mr. Fusion from Back to the Future, the dock?
Yeah.
Just put garbage in it and turns into...
Yeah, exactly. Yes, you're gonna send me down another rabbit hole. Back to the Future references.
Yeah,
good old Christopher Lloyd. But the point is, I think that this society that has access to the best energy source and the highest density energy source tends to be the one that influences the rest of the planet the most.
Right.
And because it ends up having the biggest military or most effective military, and also the same thing with their economies. Like when Churchill converted the British Navy from coal-fired to diesel-fired, it really changed their position and what they were able to do in the world, and then the Cold War was completely defined by the major superpower switching to a nuclear based energy source for its military, and the US continues to have the position it does geopolitically because it basically controls the seas.
Yeah. And
it does that because it's nuclear powered. And people really don't appreciate this kind of stuff. But China is out there building a lot of nuclear infrastructure. They're going to have advanced. Their ambition is to have operating advanced reactors within, I think, the next 5 to 10 years.
Wow.
Russia does have an advanced lead-based reactor that's running right now. And our ambition at Terrestrial is to have one of our units running in the 2020s, so next decade. And similar startups in the United States have similar timelines around their goals.
Interesting.
So I would say it's safe to say that it will happen before the 2030s, which was the most ambitious target that was set by the Gen 4 International Forum.
Yeah.
But the truth is we needed this like 20 years ago.
Right.
So we're playing catch up, and will it be enough? Time will tell. I think that depends on what your goal is to say, will it be enough? I think society needs to move on to bigger and better things, to get ambitious again, and to get everybody kind of on the same train.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not talking about equality of outcome. I'm talking about equality of opportunity.
Right.
There's 2 billion people on Earth that live in energy poverty, have zero access to electricity. You know, that's a quarter of our population that is not really part of what we're up to.
Right.
What are we losing?
Yeah.
By not plugging those people in? Like,
right.
It drives me up the wall to think about the opportunity cost of that, and not only that, and the suffering that they're experiencing when we have answers for that.
Right.
And I think by attaching ourselves to place too much and things like that, we fix ourselves in a way that makes us less adaptable than other species on Earth, and we're going to really struggle with that if we can't kind of change what problem we're trying to solve and the way we can solve it. So,
man, that's deep.
Thank you.
I want to bring some of this back.
Yeah.
From Lord Beaverbrook High School,
yes,
is where you were inspired to become an engineer.
Yes.
You went to University of Calgary.
Yes.
Became an engineer, minoring in petroleum.
Petroleum.
You went to Haskayne School of Business and earned your MBA.
Mm-hmm.
You are we talked a lot about terrestrial and about nuclear stuff. I mean, you obviously, what's the word I'm looking for? You invested in this company. You were one of the founders.
One of the founders.
Right, which is inspiring as all hell.
Yes. And that all started with a TED Talk. So I approached Kirk after and said, the oil sands is the perfect market for you to prove the technology and also gain the money to kind of fund what you're up to and then grow from there. He was a hard guy to partner with. So I ended up looking for who else was doing this, and got super lucky to find out about David LeBlanc in Ottawa, made in Canada solution. Awesome. I love that idea that Canada could really step up as an energy superpower,
right? And
Alberta could redefine itself as an energy province, not just have that mean oil and gas.
Yeah.
Use everything that we've got available to start making way cooler machines, cooler processes, export the solutions to other places.
Totally.
Right? Including, like, what regulatory framework do we have to put around this to make it work?
Yeah.
That's technology too. And the CNSC is one of the best in the world at helping countries that want to start a nuclear program to start a nuclear program. So what happens when Canada, if we're the first nation in developed Western civilization, if you want to call it that, but China's quickly putting itself in that, which is weird to call it Western civilization now, just modernity.
Yeah.
It would be wonderful to get that pole position and to do it from a place where we want to improve the rest of the world and to lead a total sort of everybody's on deck, at least, so we can set a course as humanity for the future, right? And have Canada lead that peacefully and to do really well for ourselves. Why not?
Yeah.
But we're not talking about that kind of stuff. That's what I mean. We need that kind of ambition.
But we are. I mean, even if this is the first conversation of its kind happening here on the RebelRebel podcast, which I know it's not. I mean, you've had this conversation before.
True.
I mean, you're rippling out this dream. It's the stone in the lake, right? That's happening.
Yeah. Okay, I can accept that.
So the conversation has started. Things are happening.
Yeah.
You've co-founded and started a company that's going down this way.
Mm-hmm. And we're getting close. We've passed the first layer of regulatory kind of review.
Yeah.
And that's testing us as a company more or less. We'll be coming through the second phase of that, which, if successful, will send a signal to private industry that our reactor would very likely pass a full regulatory review. So engineering would still have to be complete, and actual project would need to be put up before the government to test. But this would basically say, unless you really screw up something else, the tech should pass.
Right. We're on our way.
You're on your way, which is like the signal. We can open up our order books.
Yeah.
We can start actually doing business.
Yeah.
And we have a sister company down in the United States, Terrestrial Energy USA. It's been more or less granted a $1 billion loan guarantee from the U.S. government.
Holy.
Yeah, to build a first of a kind reactor at one of their labs, national labs.
Despite their regulatory issues?
Yep, because some of their labs are set up specifically to do the research around advanced technologies like this. And those sites like INL in Idaho National Labs, they really want to host these sort of things. Like they're going to host the first NuScale reactor. It's kind of what they do. Yeah. And so it's basically between them and probably Oak Ridge, where they built the original molten salt reactor experiment and like proved that it works.
That's amazing.
Right? So we're really just trying to bring something that's already proven, ran for thousands of hours producing electricity. We have better materials, better controls, better supply chains now. Yeah. So we want to basically step it up to that next order of magnitude and commercialize it. It's more or less what we're trying to do.
Awesome.
So,
I have so many things I want to talk about. This could be like a podcast that goes on for like 3 days. But I think I'll end up... Awesome. I'll end up... I'd like to have you back for a lot of things, but I want to talk about being an entrepreneur.
Okay.
Briefly. Mm-hmm. Because in terms of, the rebel, the creative rebel and the creative entrepreneur spirit, I mean, you seem to certainly embody it.
Oh, thank you.
You've got... I read this quote where you said... entrepreneurs are people who are bold enough to act.
Yes.
Talk to me about that.
Well, let's see. I think the title of your show is perfect. Not only because I love that song. I'll always love that song. But there is a fundamental sense as an entrepreneur, I think. Either you see something that isn't working quite right. You pay close attention to the world around you, whatever that world may be.
Yeah.
And if you see something broken, you want to do it differently to get an outcome. And so I think the classic definition of an entrepreneur is one that will rearrange the resources and things that exist, or offer something new that does that rearranging in effect to get a better result with less, or something like that. But I think there's also a fundamental break in belonging with the way things are. So you have to be a rebel.
Right.
But in order to do that, you need to start, because you don't know if you're right.
Right.
There's so much that you don't know. You could be totally wrong. You have to be able to adjust and maneuver. And maybe you were way more correct than you could ever imagine. And so success will come flooding at you, and growth will come flooding at you. And that is almost as hard to deal with as getting it really wrong.
Yeah, totally.
On the other side, like, there's no interest in this.
Yeah.
And trying to force it through. But an entrepreneur is fundamentally based in action first. You can do all the reading and theorizing and constructing mental models and frameworks, and that's all very useful. But without action, there's no result.
Right. That's awesome. I love that quote, because I think it really puts your heels to the fire. If you're walking around saying that you're an entrepreneur and you're not doing anything, that you're not. You're
not yet.
Yeah.
Maybe
you're growing there, maybe, but
yeah. That's I think Gary Vaynerchuk calls those people wantrepreneurs. Like, you're a wannabe entrepreneur.
That's amazing.
And
go
that's,
Gary.
Yeah. Go Gary V. The shout out to Gary V. The people like that will hang things like on their wall that say, like, fake it till you make it.
Right.
I can't really knock that, because some of that is true, but
yeah, sure.
But at some point, if you're wanting to be an entrepreneur, talking about it is actually a good first step.
Yeah.
That's a good way to gauge reactions out of people, and to try to recruit people into your vision, and to get people on your team and start making things happening.
Yeah.
And it's almost like how in mythology and lore and fables, the wizards that could make magic happen, all of that was based on bizarre ingredients, obscure ingredients, sure. But it was always done through what? Language.
Right.
It was the language, the specific words that only they knew, could only say just right, could actually make it happen. And I think that is the power of our word. So if you are someone that's a budding entrepreneur and you want to try something, tell someone about it.
Right, get your story out.
Mm-hmm. And that either creates like a social pressure to do what you said to maintain your integrity.
Yeah.
That effect is totally real. But there's also that recruiting effect that you might start getting help, and you're going to start getting pushed into it or pulled into it way more than you ever expected. But you have to be willing to just kind of let go of who you thought you were,
right,
in order to follow that. And
it's scary, man.
Yeah, but that's where the rebel part of it
totally
helps you, because you're not so attached to that old version of yourself, or the identity and the expectation. Like, I'm not in the oil and gas industry anymore. I can't go back to that thing. I'm going to try to keep selling the solution to them,
right,
and warning them, like, what you're doing is going to end. Like, you got to adapt if you want to stay on top of whatever pile you think you have. Start picking up some new things.
Yeah.
Start talking about yourself differently. Start branding your product. Start thinking about who your customer is, at least. Whatever it is. But you need to be willing to let go, and where you start can actually be quite lonely, and the path can be quite lonely, because you are disconnected from those things, that fabric. But it's also the thing that allows you to move with it and to be there along with it the whole journey. But it's through action. Eventually, that's the common thread.
That's awesome. Okay, Marvel or DC?
Why did you have to go there?
Yes.
I have to, only because of Dark Horse, the variation of Dark Horse. I'll have to say DC.
Wow.
But
bold.
Well,
but Dark Horse that's solid.
Yeah. Well, because of, I think it was very influential for me. The first serious money I earned, relatively speaking, was when I was kind of early teens, like 12-ish.
Yeah.
Running a paper route for the Calgary Sun.
Yeah.
Almost all of that money went straight into Another Dimension in Chinook or wherever. Like, I think down here in
Kensington. One on 10th Street.
Yeah, 10th Street. Like, there were a couple comic book stores that I ended up frequenting quite a bit. My brother ended up being more of a Marvel guy, so I know quite a bit about Marvel. Love some of the X-Men. Some of the storylines in that lore are just like so resonating for me. Is, like, I tend to think of myself as fairly accepting and progressive, socially, progressive in general. Like, I'm for people's liberties and enabling rather than oppressing, right? So I think that kind of defines you as a leftist. You're very concerned with oppression and limiting that. I think I'm more concerned with limiting suffering, but there's quite a lot of overlap there. Yeah. And so what a lot of things Stan Lee wrote about, and others, Jack Kirby and those guys in that era were so good, regardless of whether they were Marvel or DC. Yeah. They're really good at talking about social issues that were really taboo at the time. Right. And that ended up trickling into, things in the 80s and the 90s. But I would pick up things like a Batman book where they would explore some of the darker themes of that character in a much more mature and honest way. Marvel would kind of present it, but not go deep. Right. Whereas DC would. Right. And then that really got me kicked into more independent comics. Yeah. A lot of black and white, kind of pulpy things, but like.
Do you have a favorite you want to give a shout out to?
Well, I have to give a shout out to the original Preacher series.
Oh my God, yes.
Right? Yeah. That, thank God, got picked up as an AMC show.
What a great job they did of the show.
Yeah, so shout out to Seth Rogen. Thank you for doing that. Yeah. I've tweeted him that many, many times, and basically, I get super happy when he likes the tweet. Like, I'm thinking, or I give Seth Rogen a little warm and fuzzy. He's the man. But yeah, the original, though, reading that when you're coming of age and getting exposed to ideas and of all sorts, violence, sex, corruption, religion, right? Like really, really interesting stuff. And you're having an adult that you will never meet probably in the writer and the artist and the team that produces that together, having that conversation with you through the book, through the work, through the art, eliciting crazy emotional response out of you. Like, that to me was so helpful to have that in the culture and that's available. Awesome. All I had to do was just pay a little bit of money. The guy at the counter never said, man, you're like 13. You should be reading this shit. He was more like, no, you like that? Check this out. Right?
Oh, awesome.
So all kinds of different, oh man, we could talk for a long time about comics, but that's something that I've lost connection with as I've been working more focused on economics, is that I've disconnected from play. Yeah. And especially reading fiction and fictional work, and I just love that medium because it combines both.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's like a lot of it is so good, and the independent stuff so online good. Right now too, not even in book form.
What are you into these days? If one were to get back into things, and I'm the same way about video games and stuff. Like I used to be such a nerd for that shit.
Yeah, well, and you know what? Like I think the biggest, so I've got video game consoles here.
Yeah,
I'm not a huge gamer just because I've never really had a lot of time to do it. But I have these things, like I got an N64. And
I know it's Perfect Dark.
There's
I've wasted many an hour to that in GoldenEye 007.
Yeah, we've got like a Wii. In the other room where we've got, like the old Nintendo games.
Yeah, I was a big RPG guy because my mom wouldn't let me play with the kids from the neighborhood.
Yeah. Oh, so, really?
Well, I guess. I don't know. She just was very protective, and thank you, Mom, because, you fast forward 25 years and you start to see how some of that stuff plays out. You like some of the people you grew up with, like, were in jail or they OD'd and dying young, and you're like, holy man, like, thank you, Mom. Like, at the time you're mad that you weren't allowed to be one of the cool kids.
Hey, but now you own a nuclear energy company.
There you go.
So there you go.
So I owe her a lot.
Yeah. So I'll tie it up with this. Fallout 4 is my current. I mean, that's kind of an RPG.
Yeah, it's
first person kind of. You're in this post-apocalyptic world.
Probably because nuclear reactors or nuclear
totally
war.
Is nuclear
Fallout.
War.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, makes sense.
So it's pretty.
But see how that trope fucks with us?
Oh, totally. Yeah,
forever.
Or we're just going to accept it, and
Well, we should be afraid of it, but let's be honest. I don't know. Have you read Steven Pinker's latest book?
No.
He talks about how life is essentially getting better on basically every measure,
right?
And that if you pay too much attention to the news, you'd think the world's ending every minute for a different reason. And he's like, no, if you look at the actual data, it's getting better on basically every measure, and we should be really excited about this. One of his violent war, like after the nuclear bomb was dropped, there has been no major significant conflicts like those world wars since that happened. Because of that, we understand.
Yeah, it's.
That if that starts, like, that's probably it.
Yeah.
I think we don't want to go there as much as we dislike each other in a moment.
Yeah. Well, it's that social media, that social immediacy is the...
I like that.
Yeah. Social I just coined that right now.
That's beautiful. You should play with that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. But I think that's kind of what we're stuck in. Especially, like, I try to unplug quite a bit from social media, like at least digest it or take it in, chunks, because you can get caught up in it, and before you know it, you're getting whipped into a frenzy about everything.
See, and as a marketing specialist, that opinion shocks me.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, aren't these the channels of your time? For an entrepreneur to talk about themselves and what they do. Sort
of, but I mean, you gotta be careful of the spin,
and you can overdo it.
Yeah, like I think everybody shouting. Like I like contrast, right? Like what I really love is a good solid contrast. So if something's loud, often the whisper is the thing that gets my attention, right? In a magazine, if you're thumbing through it and you see ad after ad after ad, and I'll never forget this. Back in 2000, I was working at a company, and I was down in Seattle going through this magazine.
And you were living in Seattle?
I was there for a week every month.
Cool.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Seattle's beautiful.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Great city. Shout out to Seattle.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm going through this magazine, and it's just like it's like, I think probably 65% ads, 35% content. And I flip towards the middle of the book, and on the right-hand page, it's blank, except at the bottom right corner, there's a little red dot, right? With the website. And I was just like, oh. Like, I love that page. Like,
wow.
This is my favorite magazine page of all time.
Stopped you in its track.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because it's that. And that's what I think, like from a branding, marketing, creative side, that I try and create for clients, is that contrast. That, yes, all that stuff's going on out there. but what can you say that's going to make you stop?
Oh, and that could have been any website.
Totally.
That like, designer's work was just so brilliant.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure
gave you a moment.
$15,000 they probably paid for that ad, right? Not to mention the insert and all like, holy God.
Yeah.
And I want to say it was Outpost.com, but I could be totally wrong, because they had a big campaign back in the day. But it was, I mean, I still remember it.
Yeah. So this social immediacy problem that we've got, tied to the anxiety and urgency of needing attention and feeling like you belong.
And I think you can only pin it for so long until you get numb to it is a problem. The anxiety level of trying to follow and shout out and be heard and whatever is another thing.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, you can buy people. You can pay people to run your campaigns for you and automate it, and you can do all this stuff. So it's not even you doing it, but you get all the benefit from it.
And you can fake your followings, right? Well, like you acquire them, and a lot of those profiles might be not real people.
Oh, right. Or you'll have a bot that just sends out, I'll follow anybody that hashtags this.
Yes.
And so, I get this on my Instagram all the time where people are like following me, but they've never liked one of my posts. And I'm just like,
who are you?
It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
And I know that if I follow them back, their bot will just go, 2 weeks later and remove me. So it looks like, they've got 15,000 and I've only got 3.
Yeah, because there's that social proof that we want. Someone comes to your page for the first time and they're like, oh, how many people follow this guy?
Right.
Oh, there's 100,000 followers. Wow, he must really know what he's talking about. Right. Meanwhile, 10 of those people are real people that follow and engage with the work.
Right. And the other, 99,000 or 99,900 are literally, a $5,000 ad buy.
Yeah. Yeah, which is interesting because that can cause someone who's not aware of that to feel like they're behind when their profile doesn't look like that. Yeah. Not understanding that business doesn't actually come from that. It's just some kind of, it's an illusion effect.
Well, and I look at celebrities are a great indicator. Like, there's some businesses out there where I don't have an example, but they've got, 500,000 followers, and they follow 500,000 people. It's like a 1-to-1 ratio. It's kind of cool. Like, so they're engaging. But if you think about the amount of content that their social media manager must deal with, it's unbelievable. So it becomes so noisy it doesn't even matter anymore. It just becomes like a circle jerk, right?
I don't know why this made me think of that, especially now that you brought in the circle jerk reference, but the Rock had a picture on his profile the other day where he was like feeding his wife while his wife was breastfeeding their new daughter. Yeah. And it was a really cute picture. I love Dwayne.
Yeah.
And
he's awesome.
Like he's got the ties to Calgary and stuff, so he's like this beauty human. And then I'm like, who the hell took that picture? Right. It's like all the jobs that got created out of this is a huge effect. Yeah. I don't know. If I don't understand something though, I have a hard time diving in. And it's obviously a massive thing, but I'm still not in on social media, really. I'm not great at it. I don't want to be better.
And I think that
I don't want to get pulled into it and lose my life.
I think you look at what you do it for, right? Like, I suck at Twitter. Like, I'm just... There's people around me that are fucking Twitter gods. Like, my God, these people are incredible on Twitter. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, Crackmax. Right? And
shout out to Crackmax.
Shout out to Crackmax.
Yeah, they're in an existential crisis right now because Crackmax is shut down.
It's a Circle K.
It's a Circle K. What are we doing?
It's so wrong. What's going on? What's wrong with this world? But, I mean, they're great at it. And they're a great team.
They're a husband-wife pair, right?
Yeah.
Do you actually know them?
No, I mean, I see them every once in a while at Loose Moose Theater.
Okay.
Yeah, they're cool. They're good patrons there.
They're hilarious.
Yeah, they're great. But it's, like, I look at how they engage, and they're awesome, right? Like, I love that. I cannot do that on Twitter. Don't know how. Same. And it's just one of those things. Yeah. Instagram, I'm a little bit better at just because I'm visual, so I like the idea of pictures. I like taking pictures. If you check out my Instagram feed, it's not all gratuitous selfies. I like honeybees, right? There's like, I'll always find a picture of a bee on there, or, cool. People I'm with.
Pandas?
There's no actual pandas. There's panda paintings.
Cool. Do you keep separate accounts for the different things you do?
Yeah. So we got. I just started one for the RebelRebel podcast, and it's RebelRebel Pod.
Cool.
Is the Twitter and Instagram handle.
All right, I'll definitely follow.
Thanks, because I got 3 followers, I think, right now.
I'll be the 4th.
Awesome. I'll follow you back. Follow for follow. I've got Michael Dargy. At Michael Dargy is Twitter and Instagram. That's my personal. Then we've got Drop Bear and Panda on Instagram.
Cool.
And Drop Bear, like capital N, Panda for Twitter, because we ran out of characters. What about you? What's your handles? We'll put them down in the description.
For my personal account on Instagram, it's at CS Popoff, and then my first 7 for all platforms for the pod.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can follow me on Facebook personally. I think it's Chris Popoff 92 or something like that. But
cool.
Yeah, my first 7. You can find me through all of that, definitely.
Yeah, let's finish on that.
Sure.
So you're. I just realized I'm getting this crazy. Aura, like a migraine, a precursor to a migraine. It's crazy colors right now in my eyes. It's nuts.
Does that happen for you a lot?
Every once in a while, and it's.
Is there like a big pressure system moving in or something?
Yeah, it's weird. No pain, just like.
But it's gonna hit
crazy rainbow sparkles.
So what would you do next after we wrap this up?
Take lots of drugs.
Take some drugs. You lay down, get in the darkness, or what?
Yeah, no, I can't lay down.
See, I wonder what you're picking up on.
Yeah,
with that,
it's weird, right?
What sort of cosmic input are you able to take in? Well, it's affecting me too. I just don't see it the way you do.
Yeah, it's rad.
It is rad.
Anyway, back to your podcast.
Yes.
So,
what the hell is it?
Yeah, well, you've got this great podcast. My first 7.
Mm-hmm.
What?
So when I was walking around in the hallowed halls of what is now the Schulich School of Engineering, with my little Nokia cell phone, with the little banner, I was writing first 7. I wrote first 7 as in the first $1 million. For whatever reason in life, I didn't understand at the time. I understand a little better now. I wanted to be a millionaire. And I thought I thought it'd take my whole life and all that, and that would be life-changing and all that kind of shit.
Yeah.
And I can remember skiing with Lanny McDonald one day as part of like a grift trip with Baker Hughes when I was working at Pengrowth at the time. The sales guy's like, "Hey, we're going skiing," and Lanny's gonna be there this time. Yeah, I'm gonna go, and they're just trying to sell us chemicals or whatever. And we're we're hanging out at the lodge at the end of the day, and I told him, it's like, "Lanny, I want to be a millionaire." He's like, "Well, Kristen, that's what you'll be." It's like, okay. So I wrote it on the phone and when I was younger, first 7. And so basically what the show is about is my own entrepreneurial journey and how surprised I was by the concept of, instead of starting a business as an entrepreneur, going and finding someone that is retiring at the end of their track that already has a successful business, and then buying them out of it. Wow. And then continuing to run it as a business. And that's pretty much it. It's kind of like buying rental properties and then having a tenant pay for the mortgage over time. It'll take 30 years.
Yeah.
You can do the same kind of thing by finding a business that you find interesting, that you get it. It's already running, it's got staff, it's got customers, and you structure it in a way that the previous owner helps you pay for it, because they lend you much of the value that you agree the business is worth.
Interesting.
So in a sense, you end up striking a mortgage with them, and you use the cash flow of the company to pay it back.
Huh.
So what better person to give you that loan than the person who created that company? They're going to trust that business.
Sure.
And if they don't want to enter into that kind of agreement, that tells you right away they either don't believe in you or they don't believe in the business to stick around.
Right.
And we can get way more into this. That's a lot of what I talk about on the show, is how to do that and why.
Yeah.
But that's essentially it. And so I think that I want to teach more people about this option and how to do it for a number of reasons. Sean encouraged me to get out and start talking about this as a way to recruit more talent for the companies, because I did this after leaving the oil and gas industry, started Terrestrial, but that thing outgrew me so fast that, they just recruited the Ernie Moniz, the former Secretary of Energy, onto the advisory board. Like, I'm not at that level, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, it's like I'm just some 30-year-old kid. Everybody else is like 50s, 60s minimum, right? I'm the youngest guy on that team by quite a bit, and so I found myself not belonging yet again very quickly. So I kind of gracefully exited any kind of director and officer role that I had there. Still an investor, still an advisor from time to time. But I needed something else to do, and then I got laid off at Athabasca. And fortunately, we had been, myself and a few partners from school, ended up getting into acquiring small businesses at the advice of a mentor. One of my partners was dating his daughter at the time. And so he was trying to get his first mortgage for his house. And he was at dinner at their place one time and said, should I get a fixed or variable mortgage for my property? He's like, what do you want your net worth to be when you're 50? What kind of question is that?
Yeah.
And it started a conversation where he started teaching us about how Jim Pattison grew his empire, the guy with the billboards and the leasing companies, self-made billionaire. As self-made as one can be in anything. None of us are islands, obviously. But really driven guy. And Roger's like, how this guy did it was going and buying companies through a vendor take-back model. And this is how you do it. So we looked for like 2 years, found a company we couldn't afford, but we had the structure of the deal. And Roger's like, oh, well, I'll come in for half, and you guys take the other half. So we split the other half 3 ways, and he guaranteed the rest of the loan because we couldn't. And we just found a way. We got in, had a great first year, sold some really custom products that we were manufacturing HVAC goods, like sheet metal goods, and we sold some stainless steel stuff to a potash project in Saskatchewan. Humongous profit. We're like, whoa, what are we going to do with this? Turned out one of our distributors came up for sale right away after looking for 2 years. It was like 3 months, and we're already like working on our next deal. We thought we could do no wrong, man. And so sure enough, by the time I got laid off, we had an established little entity. We had the distributor and the manufacturer all together. Went from zero to that was a $15 million operation, top line, with over 30 staff. Wow. And we were in our mid-20s when we started this.
Nice.
And so I eventually got bought out of that in 2016, and I've repartnered and kind of doing it again. And this time the journey is about, last time it was about, we had the ambition of just getting out and being able to pay ourselves more or less what we were earning downtown. So we were like, we got to earn $100,000 each. And when we achieved that, it all lost momentum.
Interesting.
It's like,
need bigger dream, man.
You need a dream. If it doesn't necessarily have to be bigger, you just need to be moving towards something. Because if you don't, and you're just trying to maintain the status quo, then other shadowy shit starts creeping into reality, and it becomes much more susceptible to failure from whatever mode. You're much more vulnerable. If you're driving towards something, you're at least moving forward and able to maybe deflect against some of those other things or the darker elements of our own natures, right? So this time for me, it's less about being the technical guy on the team and executing certain things. It's about learning how to level up as a leader, truly be a manager. One of the things I learned about managing after going through and seeing how it works downtown, how leadership works in the oil and gas industry.
Dick fingers, I saw that.
Yeah, dick fingers. I love that phrase. Creepy Uncle Dick fingers. People need to start putting things in quotations like that. Leadership.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Because that's the kind of leadership
stealing that.
Go for
my
it.
new dick fingers.
Sit on my lap. Anyway, no mentorship, just totally abject dissociation from responsibility.
Power struggle.
Oh my fucking God, it's just the worst. So it's like, I definitely do not want to be this game. Like, I looked at my bosses and asked the question, do I want to be like them when I grow up? And the answer was no, fuck no. What am I still doing here then? Because that's where I'm going if I stick around. So it's like, forget that. Where the hell was I going with this? Where was I talking about with the dick fingers?
With the dick fingers.
Leadership, yeah.
Leadership.
Yeah, so do that. Go to get an MBA, and you would think that you learn about management, and really, I didn't take much from that. And, going into running a business, I thought I was well equipped, and I learned some things. I can do some technical things, and I can speak to the banks a little better. Yeah. But it did not prepare me or equip me to deal with the people that came into the office every single day.
Yeah.
I think if you want to prepare yourself to be a leader and a boss, more or less, of teams of people, you need to be studying more philosophy so you can learn how to think clearly and ask great questions.
Yeah.
And then psychology, so you can learn what are our cognitive biases and how do we interact, what are the things that we need as people, because you essentially end up being a champion for these people to just get into the goddamn office every day.
Right.
Life is pretty hard.
Yeah.
We all have our experiences growing up and getting to where we are at any given moment.
Yeah.
And as a leader, you can't pretend that stuff isn't there.
Right.
You have to at least acknowledge it and be able to work with it. And you're not learning that stuff in business school, right? And if you're an entrepreneur of anything, you're working with other people, and you're especially staff, you kind of have to be mom or dad on some level, sometimes both.
Yeah.
And you're really just helping them around. So that's kind of one of the goals, is to really get there as a leader and start to look at how I might be able to live a more global sort of lifestyle, like have more than one passport, have a little bit of my savings or investments in other places, and kind of drive towards experiences and help show my kids that the rest of the world and what that's like, and not be so fixed to one place. I'm really into this idea of detaching, but also connecting with things that I haven't connected with before.
It's a contrast.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so that concept of My First Seven is about how do you make your first $1 million, and then what does that change? If that's happened for you, how did that change you?
Right.
And what do you drive towards now? What's important now? Because the money game is different.
Yeah.
When you feel like you've achieved success at it, it's like, well, now I just know some rules, and it's all just kind of made up bullshit, and it's actually not that important, and it won't make you happy. And Biggie, more money, more problems is definitely correct. So I'm saying, if you want to be in business and you want to be an entrepreneur just to make money, this is a really interesting model to do it. It's a simple path. You can keep it simple, make your money, keep it separate, get the other needs in your life elsewhere. Don't try to solve all your emotional needs in one place. So many of us try to do it through our work.
Totally.
And it's just inappropriate. Like with my partners, I was trying to be best friends and all that stuff, and those intersections don't always work. Intersections lead to collisions, right? So be careful about the ones you build.
Write that shit down.
It's true though, right?
That's awesome.
So be cautious how you build your roads.
More flyovers. That's what we need. This has been amazing. Our time has just flown by.
I don't even know what time it is. I'm not even looking at the clock. You have to tell me what comics you're reading online before we end. The Independence. Maybe we can do that offline. Okay, sounds good.
Or that'll be. We'll do that for the second time we have you in.
All right.
Because I think that we got to get you in the next couple months for a recap.
Okay.
Because
let me know how the audience, if there's other questions or whatever that people come back with, and
put it in the comments.
Let me meet other rebels that you have on your show. That'd be fun.
We'll have a Rebel conference.
I like it. I'm into it.
All right, so maybe you're going to join us on the 27th for Fight Club. If you're listening and you're in and around the Calgary area, we'd love to have you come down there. You can meet Chris in person if he's there. Maybe he'll take the stage and be one of the fighters. Maybe he'll be a coach. We don't know. Who knows what's going to happen?
Okay, cool.
It's Fight Club for entrepreneurs.
I'm into the sparring, so maybe I'll be a fighter.
Right on
my first time. Is that one of the rules of Fight Club? You got to fight on the first night?
You can put your hat in the ring.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
To be a fighter. Chris, has been amazing. Thanks again so much for coming down.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up next week, I've got Carrie Tuttle in the studio talking about her new company, Team Mojo. What's Team Mojo? Check out next week's episode, Rebel Rebel, every Monday.